Rennes-le-Chateau. Today's name is thanks to its castle, what was only built in the 17th century. Before it had the name Raider, named after the Celtic Reduns tribe, or maybe after a Visigothic wagon camp and meaning chariot in Latin. The name Erida, however, could also derive of the name Red, a mythical Pyrenees god, serpent runner. And there even is a village in sight of Rennes-le-Chateau what still carries the name La Serpente. But let us now start to search for more marks left behind by that 19th century village priest. As I told you, he renovated the church first, but he also redesigned the place in front of the church. He created a small park with even a Maria grotto. The stones he used for it he had collected from the surroundings. Today there's only a Maria from Lourdes statue in that grotto, but originally it had been a statue of Mary Magdalene, who lived in one here according to legend. Later he replaced that statue due to personal circumstances, I will tell you about that later, but originally also this was dedicated to the sacred feminine. Look at the floor plan of what Saunière had built. That triangle also represents the feminine. It was designed that way on purpose. But let us now just go to that museum. There must be more information there about that abbé Saunière. And here we are again. Behind me the garden of the Domaine Saunière had let built after possessing all of a sudden a considerable amount of money. What he actually did was kinda restoring the old fortifications what must have been there since Visigothic times. He created new ramparts at the part of the village what was now his domain. And he even gave this ramparts a few towers. So he obviously loved the history of this little village what once had been the true capital of the whole region. But there was more about this history than what was known by most. And it was his intention to give at least a few hints, for those who had eyes to see. For example, now look at this building behind me. It is called Villa Bethania, and it is a real villa. Luxurious for those times. But first the name, a reminder of where Mary Magdalene came from, her ancestral home. She was originally Mary of Bethany. Was this built for the priest to live in? Nope. Just for certain important guests. His sponsors perhaps. Abbé Saunière continued living in the presbytery, first renovated of course, and it is there in that presbytery where the entrance to the museum is these days. This is the place where the priest kept on living, with his faithful housekeeper Marie Dinano. Next to this more usual stuff there is much more, of course. And as the tomb raider I can be, let's now talk about some tombs that got a lot of attention of the priest and one of his predecessors. Without going into too much detail, Saunière discovered a tomb during the renovation of the church. He wrote about that in his diary. That must have been in the crypt of the noble family. After that discovery all of a sudden he showed great interest in one certain grave of the graveyard next to the church. I showed you what's left of the tombstones, and here are the texts on them. The grave of the noble Marie de Negre d'Arbles of the House of Hautpoul, who deceased in 1781. Engraved by a dyslexic. Nothing more. So trying to connect certain spelling mistakes and anomalies by lines and making symbols out of that is creative, but nonsense. And that is certainly not the mystery. What is mysterious lies in what I just told you. Saunière wrote in his diary, after having been in the newly discovered crypt of the Hautpoul family, "I discovered a grave," and shortly afterwards he started spending time on the graveyard. He even started digging there. On that graveyard, he showed only interest in the grave of Marie de Negre, and he eventually erased the text of the tombstone. With the excuse of lack of space, he afterwards started to rearrange a lot of graves by digging them up. But why was that grave of the Marquise on that graveyard and not in the family crypt? Why did he erase the text on that tombstone? Because that person was not in that grave. Apart from the name of the deceased, the epitaph spoke of "Et in Arcadia ego," half in Greek. But that was the text on a different grave, the one on that certain painting and in the valley. And now here lies the true mystery of Abbé Saunière and Rennes-le-Chateau. 2 graves for one person, one with her family in the crypt and one in the cemetery? That sounds most unlikely, don't you think? But the abbé found out what was the truth behind that. And do you know what I think? He found out about the identity of that other person in that second grave. And the answer to that lies in his actions afterwards. But you know what? Let us just continue our tour now and see what Abbé Saunière had built not long after his discovery of that certain grave. There seems to be a kind of numerological message in the Domaine too. Each stair has 12 treads. Some of Saunière's later friends were connected to Freemasonry, so that could explain it. Now the stairs would lead me to the top of the newly built defensive wall of Rede, with on 2 sides of it a tower. Right of me a tower of glass, an orangery. To the left, however, one of stone. But let's first go to that orangery. Constructed on what should have been a defensive tower, so it has become a kind of glass tower. That tower is a kind of mirror image of the other one. I wonder, does all those mirror images I've seen already in this domain, and there are plenty of them, represent a message as well? Oh, that's it. The decoration makes it clear. Let me explain. The room here was built to be Saunière's library, his center of knowledge. It has 2 doors and 3 windows. 1 entrance door, a door to a stair to the roof, 2 windows with a view and a mirror, what of course has a kind of view as well. The mirror window reflects the room inside the tower, a tower called Magdala, like Maria Magdalene was named after, but Magdala also has a meaning. Magdala comes from the Hebrew migdal and means tower for its height, an elevated stage, or a raised riverbed. It means a strength. At the opposite side of the mirror window is a window with a view on. It can hardly be seen like this. But when I recall, it is on this side there is the mountain Peche Cardu. And there's also Blanchefort. And then there's that third window, that has a view on the old Templars' hideaway of Le Bézou. The original name of this old oppidum is Albadunum. Above the windows is a 3-leaf clover symbol. The Holy Trinity, of course, but those 3 round shapes of it, could it mean more? Let's go to the top of the tower, to have a clearer view on this discovery. For a discovery it is. 3 windows in this tower with 3 different views on 3 fortifications. And then the name of these. They all have names with the same meaning, only in a different language. So, and yet here we are, enjoying the same kind of view Saunière must have had. I just told you about my discovery of 3 towers, fortifications, with all 3 of them more or less the same name but each in a different language. Here's Pêche Cardew with in front a bit lower Blanchefort, shining white fortress. And here's the Templars' place, Le Bézou, once the Oppidum Albi Dunham, what means shining, white fortified place. Magdala comes from Migdal and means high fortified place, but also with the meaning of shining in it. And where I am standing right now is Tour Magdala. So there are 3 fortified high places with the very same name. How unusual. In old documents can be found how confusing that sometimes could be. When one was mentioned and people mistakenly thought the other was meant. It even led to a fight once, as was recorded in a document. So there were 3, white towers I suppose, forming a kinda triangle on the map. In attempts to solve the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau, one had drawn lines between all kind of things, as spelling mistakes on tombstones as I told you, but also on maps to connect those points that seemed kind of important. Only, one had been too eager to look for certain mysterious or even occult symbols. Especially the pentagram occurred to be very popular among certain researchers. But one had been so eager that one didn't see the obvious. Only 3 towers with exactly the same name were of any importance. One should try to draw lines between those 3 places and see what it reveals. And what is a better place to do a further investigation in this matter than in Abbé Saunière's library? So let us look here to the map and the triangle of those 3 towers. We know now it concerns 3 towers that form a long-legged triangle. I remember to have seen in the museum here some sort of long-legged triangle as well. I know there has been told a lot of bogus by 2 French jokers who even created fake documents with cryptic texts about a horse of God and blue apples. But the epitaph of Marie de Negre, what Saunière erased, was real. As was the case with the Combe sword stone, found by de Fleury. Now let's put the engraving on this stone next to our newly created triangle of 3 towers. What do we see? They are the same. Now I am curious how that will look on a map. So no pentagram but a triangle is of great importance. But leading to what? Here's the map with the 3 towers on it and lines drawn between them. Let's draw some extra lines, like on the engraving of the Combe sword stone. to me seems clear, they are the same. But those engravings in the center, to what do they lead? To the Valley of Comb's Sword, called La Dieu, the Valley of God. And there also seems to be a kind of door in that valley, called by some La Porte d'Homme, door of men, or is it menkind? I really think I am getting closer to an answer on this enigma. I sure have to visit that Valley of God. But first Villa Bethania.